Hello, everyone, and welcome back to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Preparing Leaders to Lead Through Change, sponsored by Canvas, GP Strategies, CLS, and the Regis Company. I'm Emma, a marketing associate here at Training Industry, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to go over to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. Throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat for comments and submit questions in the Q&A panel. All questions will be addressed during the event or at the end of the program during our Q&A section. Once the session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser, so please take a moment to share your feedback on the session and the speaker. And as always, all of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to those on-demand sessions. If this is your first Training Industry event, we'd like to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals like you. We offer resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, podcast, and our membership community where you can connect with peers, access exclusive resources, and get AI-powered support. We'd also love to hear what you learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms so we can continue the conversation there. And now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers. We have Jez Benton, the founder and CEO of Canvas. He has partnered with organizations including PepsiCo, JP Morgan Chase, Google, and Berkshire Hathaway, and has developed over 500 executive leaders to lead through digital and AI disruption. We also have Bruce Landry joining us. He is a co-founder and CXO at Canvas. He's an award-winning learning designer with more than 33 years of experience and has partnered with global organizations to design transformative leadership experiences that strengthen people, teams, and organizational performance. And last but not least, we have Rochelle Rosato, who is a global talent and culture executive and certified professional coach with over 15 years shaping enterprise-wide talent strategy across Fortune 500 organizations. It's so great to have the three of you here today.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. You're going to have to excuse my little crackly voice for a few minutes, but overcoming some cheering at the weekend from watching England play Norway down in Miami. And on that point, we know we are competing against a couple of things for this webinar. So one is going fifth of five, what we call in facilitation terms the graveyard shift. And the second compete is France are playing Spain right now in the World Cup semi-finals. So if you have two screens up, I'm hoping one probably has the World Cup football on and the other one has us. So the only way we thought we could impact the effects of those two things was by bringing one of our clients along with us to this webinar. So really happy to be joined by Rochelle Rosato from PVH. I'm going to introduce her a little bit more in a few moments when we get to some Q&A, so we get this thing rolling. But welcome everybody to this. So I have been listening to the previous previous four sessions today. And where we're going to take this is a little bit different. There's always a risk of going last, which is somebody may have preempted and said what we were going to say before us because we never get to see what the other organizations are talking about. And unfortunately, they haven't. If you've been at all five, you deserve an award. The sense that I got is that there were lots of talk about skills, talk about behavior, talk about frameworks, tips, etc. But nobody went particularly deep on the topic we're going to go deep on, which is mindset. And this is super important at the moment for us because not only are we going to talk about it from a leadership standpoint in this environment that we're experiencing, but it's also shown up today through the presentations. So everybody said, hey, there's no more preparing for change anymore because it's a constant. Yet, yet the title of this leader talk is preparing leaders to lead through change. And some of the frameworks about preparing leaders to lead through change. So I think as an industry, we kind of say, hey, it's a constant, but the work we're still doing is coming from a mindset of we can help people lead through this. And we just don't believe that that's true anymore. I've got a great quote from a client last week that maybe expresses this a bit better than I am. He said, I'm going to read it. A client just last week put it perfectly. We're changing while adapting to another change before we finished adapting to the first one. So that's our view, is it's not one change, then another comes along, then another comes along, and then another comes along. It's a climate change. So if you think about it from a weather standpoint, you can move through a storm, but what if change isn't the weather anymore? What if it's the climate that we're actually sat in? So that's where we're going to go today. We want to talk about when you're in true constant change, which isn't, like I said, one after another, after another, after another. It's we're changing while adapting to another change before we've finished adapting to the first one. What is it going to take? So most of these other presentations all started off with asking you about, where you're dialing in from and how you're feeling and all those kind of good things. We have a different icebreaker question that cuts straight to this issue. So I'm going to share my screen and put the question up. And if people can jump into the chat, it would be great. And I'm hoping everybody is seeing the full slide. Just want to check that. So cast your minds back. Think of the last time, yesterday, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, you experienced a really good leader in your organization struggle. Okay, think of the last time you experienced a really good leader in your organization struggle. What happened? Just noodle on that for a moment. A couple of words in here that are really important. You experienced a really good leader. Okay, not somebody who's just stepping into it for the first time. So that somebody's been around a while, has a great reputation, is well known. They're good at what they do. They have a big role. When did you see them struggle? What happened? Just pop that into the chat for me. And the reason I wanted to ask this question is I was coaching somebody last week, and I'm going to tell you this as the story to answer this question from this leader's perspective. So, anonymous organization, but needless to say, very large global multinational business. And it would be fair to say that this leader was very smart, was very senior, super respected within the organization. They've been on many leadership programs during their career. In fact, this organization has a reputation of building amazing leaders through their pipeline of leadership programs. This individual constantly gets great feedback throughout their career, highly regarded by their peers, the kind of leader any of us on this call would happily put in charge of anything. So we're in this coaching conversation. He turned up not feeling particularly happy about things and had this story to tell. What happened was overnight, a major customer changed direction without warning in reaction to something geopolitical that may or may not even happen. Right. So we've experienced these situations a lot at the moment, right? Something flares up and you're like, I'm not quite sure whether to do something here or not do something here because something may or may not happen. And tomorrow this could all be different, or the next day it could be reversed. At the same time, this individual had supply chain constraints, which meant priorities were being reshuffled. They talked about marketing needing an immediate decision on a product launch. Finance was pushing them to protect margins. Sales were talking to them about needing more speed, and operations wanted more stability. Every function in this conversation I had with him had a legitimate argument for what was going on. the interesting thing was that every decision that could have been or maybe needed to have been made would have created problems and issues and a ripple effect somewhere else. Okay, so just sit in that for a moment. Lots of cross-functional leads, lots of issues, large global multinational organization where every decision created problems somewhere else appeared. So on that Monday morning, Sam walked into a room with 20 people looking to them for clarity. Sam knew all the frameworks. Sam understood enterprise-wide thinking and stakeholder management. Sam knew how to communicate with clarity. Sam had learned how to lead change effectively. But in that moment, none of that was the hardest part. What became difficult for Sam was making sense of the situation itself. Okay, so it was complex with no right answer. And what happened to Sam was the following. Their thinking narrowed. They defaulted to protecting the function that they knew best. Conversations in that meeting with those 20 people became much shorter. Curiosity disappeared, and decisions became very reactive rather than very integrative. And the interesting thing on reflection for Sam is that they knew that everyone in that meeting felt that immediately. So here's the interesting thing, and here's the question that I want to talk about is Sam didn't forget what they had learned. They hadn't forgotten the skills and the frameworks and the tips and the this, that, and the other. They hadn't suddenly become a worse leader. Something else in that moment took over. So when facing a disorientating dilemma like that, Sam reverted to the way they'd always made sense of the world, which was through their function. And that then changed how they behaved. So they reverted back to that narrower way of operating, which was their comfort, which was through their individual function, and everything else that was required went out of the way. So why did this happen? Because it's not a knowledge gap and it's not a skills gap. What it was is the simple human thing that behavior follows mindset. And again, today, looking back over the last few calls, nobody's really been talking about mindset. Happy to jump to behavior, to the skills, to the tips, but nobody's talking about how do we actually, with leaders, develop the mindset so the correct behavior follows. So that's my preamble to this session. That's what we're going to work through. We're going to come at it from the science side of things with Bruce, and we're going to come at it from a very practical side of it with Rochelle talking about her experiences at PVH. So Bruce, to you.
Thanks, Jazz. So what we're talking about here is the way we make sense of what's happening around us, right? So why is that important? Jazz just said, because behavior follows mindset. So let's look at why that's true. We don't respond to what's happening as human beings. We respond to the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening. So I'm just going to pause there for a second and let that sink in. We don't respond to the story itself. We respond to the story we're telling ourselves, right? So that story is really important. Think about a moment, perhaps, when someone said something to you and you knew exactly what they meant by it. Then maybe a conversation with someone changed the picture or new information came to light, or you just sat with it long enough that the story started to shift on its own. And you realized you'd been completely wrong. Not that new facts appeared, your story changed. And when it changed, what you were sure happened changed with it. Now, that's not a flaw. That's how the human mind works. We're not built to process raw reality. We're built to make meaning of it instantly before we've even noticed that we've done it. And I think it's important here, human beings are meaning-making machines. We create story. There is no raw reality as to what's happening. It's the story that we put behind it. And that story isn't built in the moment. It's built from everything that's come before it, what worked, what didn't, what we were told about ourselves as leaders early on, and what we came to believe about ourselves and what we've confirmed through instincts. What made such an impact on us that we never forgot it. And all of this accumulates quietly over the years, right? Into a system that makes meaning for us, mostly without us even noticing that it's running at all. Now, what's interesting is that under pressure, that system doesn't expand, it actually contracts. So we don't reach for what we've most recently learned. We reach for what we feel is most true. And what feels most true was built long before any program or any coach or any carefully designed learning experience. Researchers at Yale, this is Arnsten 2009, have shown that under real uncontrollable pressure, the part of the brain responsible for deliberate reasoning rapidly loses function. What happens instead is that automatic patterns take over. And these automatic patterns are built on our past meaning making. It's not what people it's not that, people forget what they've learned. It's just that being under pressure itself deprioritizes it in favor of instinct and familiarity. And that's not a leadership failure. That's just simply biology. That response, reaching for what feels most true instead of what we've recently learned, has always been true of human beings. What's changed is that the environment we're operating in, disruption used to be episodic, a merger, a market shift, a new technology cycle, a new CEO. You could develop leaders for known transitions, right? Because the transitions had a beginning and an end. What organizations are navigating now, what we're all faced with as people in learning and development, is very different. It's not just more disruption. It's a different kind of disruption. It's constant instead of occasional. It's ongoing instead of event-based. That context keeps shifting before the last disruption has even taken hold, to get back to Jez's story. There's no stable new normal for us to land on. Disruption is the operating environment. It's not the exception. So in this world, you can't build skills fast enough. By the time a skill's built, the context has really already moved. What has to develop is something deeper, not just what your leaders do about a situation, but how their capacity needs to keep moving to evolve with their making sense in the first place. Skills are necessary for sure, right? But they're no longer sufficient by themselves. And if behavior follows mindset and the context keeps shifting and changing faster than skills can adapt, then the question changes completely. We stop asking, did our leaders learn the right things? And we need to start asking, do we have the capacity to keep making sense of new things as they keep changing? That's a very different developmental challenge for us. Internally, externally, doesn't matter. And it's one that most organizations aren't yet building for. Behavior follows mindset. So let's bring this to life by showing you what it looks like when an organization builds for it with intention. Jez and Rochelle?
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate that, and welcoming Rochelle to the party. So, Rochelle, you were introduced at the start by Emma. Thank you for that, but I'm going to repeat it for people. Rochelle's a global head of talent at PVH. And for some people, you might be scratching your head and wondering what PVH is, as did I the first time I heard the three letters put together like this. So I can guarantee you all will have heard of these two iconic brands of Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. And they are the two iconic brands that PVH is. So truly global. Your apparel sold all over the world. We've worked with many of your leaders, but I want to start with, Canvas, we can talk about, yeah, it's constantly changing. And yes, it's one change after another and sort of have that approach to things. But for you at PVH, what does that actually feel like? Not just for you, but for the leaders in the business.
Well, first off, hello, and it's great to be with you and having this conversation. Just listening and taking a moment to step back is absolutely true. Disruption, in our industry is permanent. I think about it, we honor one of our company beliefs, which is consumer first, meaning they inform the direction that we head in. So since I've joined PVH, believe it or not, it's 3 years just in a week. And we've been transforming and transforming since I got here within the brands and the functions within corporate. And so this final transformation that we're in the midst of is actually intended to simplify our global structure to really optimize for streamlined efficiencies in a centralized model. And we knew it was critical to adapt with agility, is what we say, which is really why our leadership framework is set around this core principle. So, to answer your question, that really is at the true heart of everything that we do around our leadership framework, is truly around adapting with that agility and really getting underneath when I say the underbelly of the mindset, informing the behaviors. It's really been about the shift of the Titanic, is how do we enable leaders across the leadership pipeline globally? We're a global organization of 34,000 leaders, 34,000 associates, but of that, 12,000, 13,000 leaders. So how do we arm them with that skill of really coaching for growth and adapting with agility?
Yeah. And that sort of underbelly of a mindset shift for people is kind of what I want to dig into a little bit. So, we started working with you about 3 years ago. So just after you joined, I guess. So it was relatively soon after you joined. So congrats on your anniversary coming up.
Exactly.
So when you joined and you spent some time figuring out the place, what were you seeing, or what were other executives telling you what was needed? Something needed to change. There's a sort of why behind that. What were some of those mindsets that needed to shift?
You had said it earlier in the tee up, which is such a, at times it could be a cliche statement, but it's so true in this new normal, which what is normal? What got us here won't get us there in terms of true success. And so what we coined with the executive team, which was, it's not going to get us moving forward towards accelerated growth. And what we recognize that director plus population is just this notion of our director plus, our VPs, we're really waiting to be told what to do, told how to execute at times, and even in terms of awaiting further clarity around strategic direction. And it became evident that just the need to lead transformation with an enterprise mindset, that need to coach for growth with a growth mindset, were really core shifts that had to occur at this critical layer, of leadership, and to do it in a way that, the notion of needing to not only wait for that clarification, but that the behaviors would follow the mindset. And even more importantly, we had to not only shift that mindset and then hold that global accountability, but we had to do that at pace. And we had to strike a rhythm and a tempo with each other, not just across the executive leadership team, but then with their directs, and do it in a way where we gained momentum and consistency to, quite frankly, turn that Titanic. And so in order to create a partnership with you, Jez, with Canvas, the leadership team, and to create a program that had such inertia was actually quite unique. So just to be able to identify not just the problem of waiting to be told what to do, but then to say, okay, I think what you framed out early on was really a systemic problem that had been going on for quite some time. And then actually what we found to be true in a relatively short amount of time with our accelerator program in flight was that, believe it or not, that was even happening at that layer right underneath, that not just our VP population and above, but really, as I had mentioned, that director population, but even that layer of leadership below, is that this was a systemic issue happening underneath. And that for the leading teams, this whole mindset shift, I think even in your message, there's really something to it here. And so that's what was really informing our whole overall leadership and development strategy going forward.
Yeah, we could have walked into that situation together and sat around the table and said, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to build this skill, we need to build that skill, we need to build the other skill. And of course, part of the project and the work we have does that. But actually, all of the work that's done preceding that is all mindset shifting. Because I think it was fair to say, if we knew, if you have an audience of people who are, to your point, waiting to be told what to do, that the culture in the organization isn't one of agility or figuring out what we need to do or recognizing particular situations. And if we'd have just taught some skills in isolation, I don't think it would have had the kind of cultural shift that it's had within the organization, because we'd have taught a skill and they'd have known it, it'd have been put on the shelf, but they'd still be waiting to be told what to do with it. As opposed to a fundamental shift for the mindset. Yeah. So my next question, last time we chatted, which was, I think, was last week, you had mentioned that it's been humbling to see people evolve and change within the organization, experiencing people showing up differently, experiencing the mindset and the behavior shift. So what does that look like? Give us some examples of what you're seeing. Obviously, not naming those people, but just what are some of those things that have brought you joy in seeing the changes in PVH?
I'm smiling big, and the reason why I'm smiling big is that when you talk about mindset shift and behaviors follow, it's a really gratifying moment as a talent leader, as an executive leader, to not only watch these shifts occur, but not only do the shifts occur over time. When you really look at, we are two iconic brands, and so while you say these massive numbers of 30,000 global organization, but it can be quite small when you look to break down silos and you bring these leaders via a program to say, okay, it's your problem to solve. It's our problem to solve. Together, we can work to solve these problems. We have business simulations through our accelerator program that they work to solve these I would say very complex business challenges, and the solutions that actually they've put into place continue on because they're that complex, but they're our problems to solve. So with our executive leaders as sponsors, these participants of our programs have actually come together to solve business challenges. They've done it together. They've broken down the silos. They've cross-collaborated across functions, and they've pulled together solutions that now continue to live on. It isn't just a one and done. Those solutions and these work streams now continue to move forward. And I think the dual-pronged approach that now we've put in place, these are actually teams that now their leadership teams continue to work towards solutioning. And actually, this is informed going forward. We like to call them, these are now leadership teams that they gain visibility as a result. A sponsorship program has been stood up as a result. We now have actually 12 promotions as a result of our accelerator program. That, thank you to the Canvas leadership team, but this continues to live on now that we've had 150 participants go through, which is really, really exciting. So I think what we have actually found, talk about a mindset shift, and in terms of this is our enterprise challenge, but it really speaks volumes comes to our ability to not only have the participants and the leaders that are going through the problem to say, this is our problem, this is your right to lead from the front, but this is actually demonstrating to their leaders in their ability to solve the problem that this is a new behavior shift for their managers, their line managers, to watch how differently that they can behave and how they go about the problem when they are in that moment. And that was actually had me thinking that the example that you gave when you opened up, that we're actually living proof of that, Jez, in the moment, how we're actually going through our transformation and our problem solving and how we assimilate. And so in that example, as I'm actually working my way through giving you live examples now of just some of the very few examples that we give in our town halls, when they come up and they, we give them a spotlight, we're giving them those spotlights and those opportunities to be seen, to be visible, and give some of those working dynamics and those examples so that they are actually, I would say, just in time, and giving a spotlight to them so they can actually share what's working. And it's not to say that it's all, sun and glory. There are challenges. And I think that's also the reality too, is where they're using that spotlight and that time, their executive sponsors, to work through where it's challenging, but it's actually made it easier for them to then pull in some of the executive sponsors to then accelerate what's getting in the way.
Yeah, I think one of you hit on something there about the continuous nature. So, we can kind of look at the PVH example as a great example where we've managed to shift the mindsets and behaviors and the skill sets of folks in service of the constant change and transformation that you have. But what we're trying to build within those participants is that muscle to continually be in that cycle, right? So it's what's the next disruption? What's the next challenge that we're facing? How do we go about doing that? And with the person I've been coaching with the story from before, where they sort of they went from, hey, I'm meant to be a global leader here with an enterprise-wide mindset, but as soon as the pressure is on, I revert back to my functional mindset. I'm trying to break out of that cycle. With these leaders at PVH, have broken out of the cycle of waiting to be told what to do and really owning everything within the organization and driving it forward. It's not just for now, it's the next time a disruption hits, how quickly what's needed now? How do I need to change? How do I need to shift my mindset and behavior again and again and again and again? So I took a peek at some of the feedback with, just as you know, in the thick of the third cohort. From the second cohort, we had some feedback from individuals that said truly transformative, about true personal resets, and about a true purpose found throughout that work. We talked about kind of what that means in practice, how we've seen people showing up differently, but how does that pause? Because the program is a pause for people, right? It's an opportunity to press the pause button, to reflect, to shift their mindsets and shift their behaviors. How that pause seems that felt really important. Can you just speak to that? Because again, organizations who are moving at pace and are fast charging and things are changing rapidly, the hardest thing to do is actually press the pause button. And we do it programmatically here. And I'd just love to get your thoughts on, when people say things like it's been truly transformative and a true personal reset, it has been the ability for them to pause and really reflect and understand. So any thoughts on that from a sort of how we've pulled the program together?
Absolutely. The top two that come to mind in terms of just being up close and personal, what I'm seeing is a true confidence, a bravery. There's a courageous unearthing coming forward in terms of pushing back, right? So there's a ability to push back, challenge status quo, and come forward with data, right? Just a proof in the data as to why or why not we should be pushing forward. And so there's a desire to identify key stakeholders, unearth the key data points as to pushing forward with a business case as to why we should or we shouldn't move forward with whatever the project and or business purpose that they're pursuing, whatever it is or isn't, in terms of executive sponsorship behind the pursuit. I find it actually quite fascinating, but it is so poignant, and that is why I am pulling that one first and foremost forward. So it is, like I mentioned, that the word inertia, there is absolutely an inertia coming forward, particularly from this cohort. So there's something you and the team are doing right in terms of there's a pause and there's an absolute, it's noticeable, it's palpable in terms of just the ability to come forward with bravery. There's a courage, and they seem to be doing this in a sense together. So there might be something happening behind the scenes. I'm not sure. I guess we'll wait and see, and we'll share for whoever's tuned in to the webinar. But there's something happening, and I think it's exciting. And I would also say the second is this notion of the leaders as coach, and in terms of taking time with their teams. There's also the beautiful reality. We have a people and growth development priority. So there's also taking time with your teams, taking the teams on the journey. There's a lot of time and effort within the accelerator program and visioning and coaching, not just for self, first and foremost with self, but also slowing down to speed up, ensuring that not only you as leader are very clear in the vision and the purpose, but then also being transparent enough, showing up as authentic leader, ensuring that the team is clear as to how you are going through the change and why, and essentially the brief, right? The who, what, where, when, why, and really taking them through that vision and ensuring that they're grounded in the vision going forward and the purpose behind it. And so I will say that those are the two that I will highlight that are truly coming to the surface, that I see as truly paramount.
Super. Thank you, Rochelle, and thank you for joining and being willing to be hammered by questions from me about the program. Bruce, there's been a couple of questions and comments in the chat. I don't know whether you've noticed them, but it's quite a good segue for us. People asking to sort of share the framework and how we think about behavior follows mindset. So I'm going to share my screen. We have a few slides on this, and then we're going to share that framework with everybody that's on this session. So, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks, Jez, and thanks, Rochelle. So, I mean, look, folks, everything Rochelle just described, the ability to notice the story you're telling under pressure, or to question assumptions that are no longer serving, or to reach for a different response when everything in you is telling you to do something familiar, that's not a skill. A skill is something that you can teach directly, right? It's something you can, it's a process, it's a framework, it's a technique that you can pick up and you can use it. And what Rochelle's describing here, you can't hand someone in a training room. It is developing that capacity. So while Rochelle's talking about the program itself, the learning journey is really what I think is important. So some folks are asking, what's that process look like? And I'd like to hear more about that, says Daniela. I think one of the things that we often have to struggle with in our space of people development is this notion that we want to get it done fast. And I think it's important to recognize that the stories that we have, the meaning making that we've created over our entire life is not something we flip a switch on and change. It's something that you really have to put intention behind. And so what we're talking about is, a leader's capacity to really transform. And so one of the things that you can do is, we've talked about pausing, is to slow things down, to create the right conditions so that people can reflect in a deeper way. We talk about, for decades, we've talked about IQ and what you know, and EQ and how you relate. And obviously those things absolutely matter, right? But both were designed for an environment was more stable and more predictable than the one we're operating in now. Leaders need to develop transformative capacity. We need to move beyond skills, EQ, and IQ. And really that capacity to reflect on how you and how your leaders are making meaning and to deliberately shift it when the situation demands. And so part of the answer to the questions that I see in the chat are, this is not a one and done. This isn't once, this is repeatedly, as the context keeps changing. So part of the answer to those good questions is it's not the 5 steps of something or you do these 3 things and you're going to get there. It is a deep commitment to the work and a willingness to really understand your story and to help your leaders with that process by creating the conditions and making it okay to slow down enough to actually do it. The organizations that can build this capacity in their leaders are the ones that can respond to complexity with better clarity, with less noise. They can move through things without having all the answers. They keep people aligned and energized while things keep shifting. Picture a leadership team, for example, midway through a planning process that's no longer working. And the ones with this capacity, they don't freeze. They don't just push harder on the original plan. They pause. They name what's actually true now, and they adjust out loud together instead of pretending that the plan just needs more effort. The capacity to disrupt your thinking in context, that's really what makes organizations genuinely adaptive. It shows up in better decision making under pressure. Less energy is lost to teams stuck arguing about a plan that's already dead, and people keep performing instead of stalling out when the playbook no longer applies. And if you've been in this world over the past 10 years, there are a lot of playbooks that no longer apply. And so really the work starts here. Not with a program, not with a framework, with leaders really turning the question inward, right? Most leaders have been asked hundreds of times what they would do, and almost none of them have been asked, what are you assuming, right? What's your story coming into this problem we're solving for? What's your mental model? What's the meaning you're making coming into this? And, the thing that I think we struggle with is that sometimes in this work is that, nobody can do this part for somebody else. You can't hand a leader their own story, right? What you can do, however, is create the conditions where they can find it themselves. And that shift, it's not a one-off, it's a practice. And really, if you think about it, you've been doing it for the past 40 minutes. That's what this session's been since the beginning. Turn things over to Jez.
Thanks, Bruce. I am going to try and close questions, not particularly. What we are going to do is share with you what we call a TQ ebook, which is our transformative capacity work and what we like to call transformative intelligence. But I just want to kind of bring this home with a few thoughts. One is we've been pretty clear, as has everybody else, there's no change through anymore, and it's not just one change followed by another followed by another. It's actually overlapping and compounding.
Yep.
The behavior follows mindset, and that the capacity to keep evolving is what separates organizations that adapt from those that don't. So those leaders that we see at PVH and other organizations that we work with, the highly effective ones is exactly this. A capacity to keep evolving is what separates organizations. You can't evolve once into this new change and transformation and then go, I've done it. It's this constantness to it. And that's what the transformative quotient work and framework that we can share with you is all about. And then finally, just for everybody on the call, so if you are, you know, competitors, designers, internal folks, whoever you are, I think these three guiding questions would be quite useful, which is what capabilities will still matter when today's skills become obsolete? Okay, what capabilities will still matter when today's skills become obsolete? How are we helping leaders evolve their thinking, not just expand their knowledge? Okay, so how are we helping leaders evolve their thinking, not just expand their knowledge? If you've got a leadership development program and it's just skill building, knowledge acquisition, skill building, academic, cognitive, then you have a real problem. And then what are we doing today to keep to build leaders who can keep adapting tomorrow? How are you building that adaptive capacity, that transformative capacity within your leaders continuously? So that's where we're gonna end out. If you want further details, questions, reach out to us directly. We're right up on time, so we're gonna have to call it a close. Go France or Spain, whoever is there. Myself and Bruce's email here. If you didn't get a copy of the Transformative Quotient ebook, just hit us up, and we're more than happy to send that and share that framework with you. Rochelle, as always, thank you, my friend, for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'll see you next week in New York. Bruce, thank you. Emma, thanks very much.
Thank you, training industry.
Thank you all, and thanks to all of our attendees for joining us. I'd like to thank all of our speakers from the entire event and all of our sponsors, Canvas, GP Strategies, CLS, the Regis Company, and Impact. All of our sessions today are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CPTM. Send an email to lspite@trainingindustry.com if you need those codes. If you're a CPTM, good news, we make it easy so you can log in, log this into your tracker. If you have any questions, you can email us at courses@trainingindustry.com. And a few other resources for you guys. We have the Training Industry Strategy Summit coming up this fall. It is 3 days of intensive learning and collaboration. You'll leave equipped with the tools, frameworks, and insights you need to lead L&D strategy with confidence. You'll be inspired, but also ready to implement measurable change in your organization. Early bird pricing ends at the end of the month, so don't wait to register. And then if you're looking to elevate your L&D career or gain the expertise to build effective leadership development programs that drive organizational success, you can earn your leading leadership development certificate to begin developing better leaders and achieving greater impact. One last reminder that a survey is going to pop open in your browser when you exit this webinar, and we really appreciate your feedback, so please take a moment to fill that out. And once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. Until next time, I'm Emma. Have a great day, everyone.